It begins not with a bustling port, nor with the hum of industry, but with silence, the kind of silence that only the sea can hold. The waters of the Gulf of Mexico stretched endlessly, shimmering under the Texas sun, and along its southern coast lay a bay that would one day carry the name Corpus Christi. But before ships anchored here, before railroads carved their way inland, this place was a frontier of survival, mystery, and untold stories. On June 13, 1519, Spanish explorer Alonso Alvarez de Pineda sailed along the Texas coast. He was mapping the Gulf shoreline, searching for rivers, harbors, and lands that Spain could claim. When he came upon a lush, semi-tropical bay, he marked it on his charts. The day happened to be the Roman Catholic feast of Corpus Christi, the celebration of the body of Christ. And so the bay was christened with a name that carried both reverence and destiny. This bay was not empty. Long before Pineda's sails appeared on the horizon, indigenous peoples had lived along these shores. The Karankawa, a coastal tribe, knew the rhythms of the tides, the migrations of fish, and the secrets of survival in a land both generous and unforgiving. They were tall, fierce, and deeply tied to the waters. To outsiders, they seemed mysterious, even threatening. To themselves, they were guardians of a coastline that had sustained them for centuries. Why does this matter? Because the story of Corpus Christi is not just about a city, it's about a stage where cultures collided, where survival was tested, and where the future of Texas itself was shaped. This bay would become a crossroads of empire and rebellion, of commerce and conflict, of faith and ambition. And it all began with the Karankawa watching as foreign sails cut across their horizon. Corpus Christi Bay lies at the mouth of the Nueces River, a place where fresh water meets salt water, creating fertile grounds for life. The geography itself is dramatic. Barrier islands shielding the bay, coastal plains stretching inland, and a climate that could shift from serene to violent in a heartbeat. Hurricanes, droughts, and floods were not rare. They were constant reminders that nature ruled here. For the Karankawa, this environment was both home and battlefield. They were semi-nomadic, moving with the seasons, hunting deer and bison inland, fishing and gathering shellfish along the coast. They painted their bodies, carried bows taller than most men, and were known for their skill in warfare. Spanish accounts often described them as intimidating, but those same accounts reveal admiration for their resilience. And yet, their fate was sealed the moment Pineda named the bay. The Spanish crown had laid claim, even if no permanent settlement followed immediately. The name Corpus Christi was a marker, a promise that this place would not remain untouched forever. For centuries after Pineda's voyage, Corpus Christi Bay remained largely a frontier. Spanish missions rose elsewhere in Texas, but the Karankawa resisted attempts to settle their lands. They fought fiercely against encroachment, and their reputation spread. Few colonizers dared to establish themselves here permanently. Corpus Christi nearly didn't exist at all. The bay was known, charted, and named, but it was avoided. Harsh conditions, hostile resistance, and the remoteness of the coast kept settlers away. For much of the 1600s and 1700s, it was a place of passing ships, not permanent towns. Still, the bay lingered in maps and minds. It was a potential harbor, a gateway to inland Texas, and a strategic point for trade. The Karankawa held it, but history was closing in. By the early 1800s, change was inevitable. Mexico had won independence from Spain in 1821, and Anglo-American settlers began pushing into Texas. The Bay of Corpus Christi became a contested frontier. Traders and adventurers saw opportunity. A coastal village could thrive here, serving as a link between inland ranches and the Gulf. In 1839, Colonel Henry Lawrence Kinney established a trading post on the bay. He sold supplies to soldiers and settlers, and his post became the nucleus of what would grow into Corpus Christi. Kinney's settlement was modest, wooden structures, tents, and a handful of families, but it was the first permanent foothold. Kinney's trading post was not just a business, it was a pawn in a much larger conflict. The Republic of Texas, newly independent from Mexico, was still unstable. Borders were contested, loyalties divided, and war loomed. Corpus Christi was about to become a stage for one of the most dramatic turning points in American history. Think about it, a bay named by Spaniards, guarded by indigenous tribes, avoided for centuries, suddenly becoming a settlement in the 1830s. Why then? Why here? The answer lies in geography and timing. Corpus Christi Bay was deep enough for ships, sheltered by barrier islands and close to the contested Rio Grande border. It was a natural harbor waiting to be claimed. Kinney's settlement grew slowly, but it attracted attention. Soldiers passed through, ranchers traded cattle, and merchants saw opportunity. By the mid-1840s, Corpus Christi was more than a trading post. It was a gathering point for armies. General Zachary Taylor camped here with thousands of U.S. troops in 1845, preparing for war with Mexico. The quiet bay had become a military staging ground, and the fate of nations was being decided on its shores. Corpus Christi's first real boom came not from trade, but from war. The Mexican-American War erupted in 1846, and Taylor's army marched south from Corpus Christi to the Rio Grande. The settlement became famous overnight, its name carried in newspapers across the United States. What had been a forgotten bay was now a symbol of expansion, ambition, and conflict. And yet, the Karankawa were still here, watching history unfold. Their resistance continued, but disease, displacement, and warfare were eroding their numbers. By the late 1800s, they would vanish from the region, their legacy remembered only in fragments. The city was rising, but it was rising on the bones of those who had guarded the coast for centuries. By the mid-1840s, Corpus Christi was still little more than a cluster of wooden buildings and tents. Colonel Henry Lawrence Kinney's trading post had attracted merchants, ranchers, and adventurers, but the settlement remained precarious. Its population was small, its infrastructure fragile, and its future uncertain. Yet geography gave Corpus Christi a role it could not escape. The bay was deep, sheltered, and strategically located near the contested border between Texas and Mexico. When the United States annexed Texas in 1845, tensions with Mexico escalated. The Nueces River was claimed by Mexico as the boundary, while the U.S. insisted the Rio Grande marked the border. Corpus Christi, sitting between these rivers, became the staging ground for war. General Zachary Taylor marched his army to Corpus Christi in 1845, establishing a camp that swelled the settlement's population overnight. Thousands of soldiers arrived, drilling on the sandy plains, preparing for conflict. The quiet bay became a military hub, and the name Corpus Christi appeared in newspapers across the nation. This sudden fame was not built on prosperity, but on war. The settlement's survival was tied to conflict, and its destiny was being shaped by forces far beyond its control. In 1846, Taylor's army marched south from Corpus Christi to the Rio Grande, igniting the Mexican-American War. The settlement itself did not see battle, but it became synonymous with the war's beginning. Soldiers remembered the bay as their launching point, and the city's name became etched into the story of America's expansion. For Corpus Christi, the war was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, the influx of soldiers brought business to Kinney's trading post. Merchants sold supplies, ranchers traded cattle, and the settlement gained recognition. On the other hand, the war underscored the fragility of the town. Its prosperity depended on conflict, and when the soldiers left, the economy faltered. Still, the war had planted a seed. Corpus Christi had proven its strategic value. It was not just a village, it was a port that mattered. After the war, Corpus Christi struggled to redefine itself. Kinney continued to promote the settlement, envisioning it as a commercial hub. He advertised land, encouraged settlers, and dreamed of transforming the bay into a thriving port.
Corpus Christi's growth was slow, hindered by isolation. The settlement was far from major trade routes, and transportation was difficult. Roads were poor, railroads non-existent, and shipping limited. Hurricanes and storms frequently battered the coast, destroying infrastructure and discouraging investment. Yet ambition persisted. Merchants saw opportunity in the bay's natural harbor. Ranchers drove cattle to Corpus Christi, shipping them to markets in New Orleans and beyond. The settlement became a link between inland Texas and the Gulf, a place where commerce could flourish if given the chance. But prosperity was never simple. Corpus Christi faced internal conflicts that threatened its survival. The Karankawa, though diminished, continued to resist encroachment. Skirmishes erupted, and settlers lived in fear of attack. Disease also plagued the settlement, with yellow fever and cholera outbreaks devastating the population. And then came the Civil War. Corpus Christi, like much of Texas, was caught in the storm of secession. The city supported the Confederacy, and Union naval forces blockaded the coast. In 1862, Union gunboats attacked Corpus Christi, bombarding the town and forcing Confederate defenders to retreat. Buildings were destroyed, commerce halted, and the city's fragile prosperity collapsed.
Corpus Christi survived. Despite bombardment, blockade, and economic ruin, the settlement endured. Its resilience became part of its identity, a theme that would carry through the decades. After the Civil War, Corpus Christi faced the challenge of rebuilding. The economy was shattered, infrastructure destroyed, and population diminished. Yet the bay remained, a constant reminder of potential. Merchants and ranchers returned, rebuilding businesses and reviving trade. The cattle industry became central to Corpus Christi's economy, with herds driven to the port for shipment. The city grew slowly but steadily, its identity tied to commerce and survival. By the late 19th century, Corpus Christi was no longer just a village. It was a city, with schools, churches, and businesses. Railroads finally reached the settlement, connecting it to inland Texas and expanding its trade. The dream of a thriving port was becoming reality. Corpus Christi nearly collapsed multiple times. Hurricanes destroyed buildings, epidemics decimated the population, and wars disrupted commerce. Yet each time the city rebuilt, each disaster became part of its story, each survival a testament to resilience. Corpus Christi was not just a place, it was a character in history, defined by struggle and rebirth. The Gulf of Mexico, aka the Gulf of America, is beautiful, but it is also merciless. For Corpus Christi, storms were not occasional visitors, they were recurring trials. The most infamous came in September 1919, when a hurricane struck with devastating force. Winds exceeding 100 miles per hour ripped through the city, flattening homes, destroying businesses, and leaving hundreds dead. The storm was catastrophic not only in its destruction, but in its timing. Corpus Christi was still a growing city, eager to establish itself as a modern port. The hurricane nearly erased decades of progress in a single night. Survivors described streets littered with debris, families displaced, and a city brought to its knees. Out of devastation came determination. The 1919 hurricane became a turning point. Civic leaders realized that survival required more than rebuilding. It required foresight. The Corpus Christi seawall was constructed in the aftermath, a monumental project designed to shield downtown from future floods. The seawall was more than concrete, it was a symbol of defiance, proof that the city would not surrender to the sea. Even as storms battered the coast, industry began to transform Corpus Christi. The early 20th century brought railroads, finally connecting the city to inland Texas. This was the breakthrough that visionaries like Henry Kinney had dreamed of decades earlier. With railroads came trade, and with trade came opportunity. The port of Corpus Christi, officially opened in 1926, marked the city's true arrival as a commercial hub. Oil was the driving force. South Texas was rich in petroleum, and Corpus Christi became a center for refining and shipping. Tankers carried crude oil from the port to markets across the globe, while refineries lined the coast, reshaping the skyline with smokestacks and pipelines. Corpus Christi's rise was not guaranteed. Competing ports like Galveston and Houston threatened to overshadow it. Corpus Christi had to fight for recognition, lobbying for federal investment and proving its strategic value. The city's leaders envisioned not just survival, but dominance, and the port became their weapon in that battle. The 1919 hurricane was only the beginning. In 1933, another storm struck, flooding neighborhoods and destroying property. In 1970, Hurricane Celia devastated Corpus Christi, causing billions in damage. Celia was particularly brutal. Winds tore roofs from homes, shattered windows, and crippled infrastructure. Each storm tested the city's resilience. Families rebuilt homes, businesses reopened, and civic leaders strengthened defenses. The seawall was reinforced, disaster planning improved, and infrastructure modernized. Hurricanes became part of Corpus Christi's rhythm, destruction followed by rebirth, loss followed by resilience. By mid-century, Corpus Christi had become one of the largest ports in the United States. Oil refineries dominated the economy, shipping terminals expanded, and the city thrived. The port handled not only petroleum, but also agricultural products, military supplies, and manufactured goods. The city's growth was dramatic. Skyscrapers rose downtown, neighborhoods expanded, and commerce flourished. Corpus Christi was no longer a fragile settlement, it was a modern urban port, a gateway between Texas and the world. The rise of industry brought prosperity, but also challenges. Pollution threatened the bay, industrial accidents scarred the city, and economic dependence on oil made Corpus Christi vulnerable to global market shifts. The city's survival was tied not just to storms, but to the volatility of commerce. Corpus Christi's survival was not just about hurricanes and industry, it was also about forgotten battles. Labor struggles. Dock workers and refinery employees fought for fair wages and safe conditions. Strikes and protests revealed tensions between industry and community. Civil rights. Mexican-American communities, long marginalized, demanded recognition and opportunity. Activists challenged segregation in schools and workplaces, reshaping the city's social fabric. Environmental battles. Citizens fought to protect the bay from pollution, balancing industry with ecology. These battles were quieter than hurricanes, but just as transformative. They reshaped Corpus Christi's identity, proving that survival meant more than rebuilding. It meant justice, dignity, and sustainability. By the late 20th century, Corpus Christi was defined by its port and its resilience. Oil, agriculture, and trade sustained the economy, while hurricanes continued to test survival. The city had grown from a fragile settlement into a modern urban port, but its identity remained tied to struggle. Corpus Christi was a city that refused to die. It had survived war, disease, hurricanes, and economic upheaval. Each disaster became part of its story, each survival a testament to resilience. Beyond industry and storms, Corpus Christi's survival was also about people. Families rebuilt homes after hurricanes, workers endured dangerous conditions in refineries, and communities fought for equality. The city's resilience was not abstract, it was lived daily by those who refused to leave, who believed in Corpus Christi's future despite hardship. Consider the fishermen who returned to the bay after storms, casting nets into waters that had swallowed homes. Consider the dock workers who labored through strikes, ensuring ships continued to sail. Consider the families who rebuilt after Celia, turning rubble into neighborhoods once again. These stories are the heartbeat of Corpus Christi. They remind us that survival is not just about infrastructure, it is about human determination. Corpus Christi was never a monolith. From its earliest days, it was a crossroads of cultures. Indigenous tribes, Spanish explorers, Mexican settlers,
Anglo-American pioneers, and waves of immigrants drawn by commerce and opportunity. By the 20th century, this diversity had become the city's defining feature. Mexican-American communities formed the backbone of Corpus Christi's labor force, working in refineries, docks, and agriculture. Yet they often faced discrimination, limited opportunities, and segregation. Schools, neighborhoods, and workplaces reflected divisions that mirrored the broader struggles of Texas and the United States. Out of struggle came strength. Corpus Christi became a center for Mexican-American activism, a place where leaders rose to demand equality, recognition, and justice. In the 1940s and 1950s, Mexican-American organizations began to challenge segregation and inequality. The League of United Latino American Citizens, founded in Texas, played a pivotal role in Corpus Christi. Activists fought for educational opportunities, voting rights, and fair treatment in employment.
One of the most significant figures was Dr. Hector P. Garcia, a physician and veteran who founded the American GI Forum in Corpus Christi in 1948. The organization was created to address the discrimination faced by Mexican-American veterans returning from World War II. Garcia's leadership extended beyond veterans. He became a national voice for civil rights, advising presidents and shaping policy. Corpus Christi was not just a backdrop for Garcia's activism, it was the crucible where his vision took shape, where local struggles became national movements. The city's story of survival now included the survival of dignity, rights, and identity. While activism reshaped politics, culture reshaped identity. Corpus Christi became a hub for Mexican-American music, art, and traditions. Tejano music thrived, blending Mexican folk with American influences, creating a sound that carried across Texas and beyond. In the late 20th century, Corpus Christi gave rise to one of the most iconic figures in Tejano music, Selena Quintanilla. Known as the Queen of Tejano, Selena grew up in Corpus Christi, performing with her family band before rising to international fame. Her music transcended borders, blending English and Spanish, tradition and modernity. Selena's story was not just about fame, it was about representation. She embodied the aspirations of Mexican-American communities, proving that their culture could thrive on the global stage. Her legacy remains woven into Corpus Christi's identity, a reminder that culture is as powerful as commerce in shaping a city. As Corpus Christi grew, its communities transformed the city. Churches, schools, and civic organizations became centers of life, fostering resilience and solidarity. Festivals celebrated heritage, from Dia de los Muertos to the Buckbays Carnival, blending tradition with modernity. Yet challenges persisted. Poverty, inequality, and environmental issues tested the city. Industrial growth brought jobs, but also pollution. Hurricanes continued to strike, displacing families and destroying neighborhoods. Each challenge forced Corpus Christi to confront its identity, not just as a port, but as a community. Corpus Christi's strength lay not in avoiding hardship, but in facing it together. Community organizations, activists, and cultural leaders ensured that the city's transformation was not just economic, but human. Many of Corpus Christi's most transformative stories remain hidden. The quiet struggles of dock workers, the resilience of families rebuilding after storms, the activism of students demanding equality, all of these shaped the city as much as refineries and ships. Corpus Christi's modern transformation was not just about infrastructure, it was about people demanding to be seen, heard, and remembered. By the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Corpus Christi had become a city of contrasts. Its port ranked among the largest in the nation, fueling industry and commerce. Its cultural identity thrived, carried by music, art, and activism. Its communities continued to face challenges, but also continued to transform the city. Corpus Christi was no longer just a port. It was a symbol of resilience,
diversity, and transformation. Its identity was shaped not just by storms and industry, but by culture and community.